Right now, something is happening in the Middle East that's raising the price of everything you buy. Everyone knows that in late February, the United States and Israel launched an air assault on Iran, right? But why has a war thousands of miles away, in a country most people can't even point to on a map, made stock markets fall faster than expectations for precocious children after high school? I think some people see war in Iran headlines, remember the 20 years America spent in Afghanistan, then tune out the next 300 articles they see about the Middle East. Or they've heard it's about oil and think the US is invading Iran because it wants its oil, but that's not what's happening. Let's talk about what is going on, what it means, and what's at stake for you and the entire world.
The mixed messages from the US about the direction of the Middle East war.
New images capturing the first set of US ground troops in the Middle East.
President Donald Trump is threatening an enormous attack on Iran.
What this entire war has begun is based essentially on a miscalculation.
Dow was over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing.
What a light and fun topic for my first video back, huh? To quickly get everyone up to speed, this conflict didn't manifest out of nowhere. You don't launch missiles just for fun. For decades, Israel, Iran, and the US have seen assassinations, military actions, and failed negotiations. As recently as 2025 even, there was the 12-day war that resulted in hundreds of casualties. The history is long and complex, so think of the recent news as an escalation of ongoing tensions. Before the strike, we were in nuclear negotiations with Iran that, at least according to the Omani mediator, were making progress in late February, but then Israel and the US launched surprise strikes on hundreds of Iranian targets and killed Iran's supreme leader, this guy, Ayatollah Khamenei, along with other Iranian leadership. Now, the Ayatollah was not a good guy. Before the strike, his regime killed thousands of civilian protesters, which is why you may have seen videos of celebrations in the news. Not that that excuses what's happening, but just to put it into perspective. So why does the United States care about the Middle East at all? President Trump's boundless altruism. No, for decades, the most powerful countries on Earth have postured around the Persian Gulf because everything in the world runs on oil. And when you imagine oil, of course, you think transportation. Your car, the planes and trucks that ensure your hemorrhoid cream gets delivered overnight. But oil affects way more than you might think. Do you like to eat? Well, the fertilizer that makes your food needs oil. And if you want your food to be boxed in the supermarket instead of splayed on the ground in a macabre slop pile, then you need oil for the packaging. Plastics in your electronics, tires, asphalt, chemicals, and medicine, just Google it. You'd be shocked how much depends on oil. And this region, the Persian Gulf, sits on roughly half the world's proven oil reserves. Since the end of World War II, the United States, Russia, China, Europe, every major country has watched closely or tried to position itself to control this region, or at least influence it. Not necessarily because they want to own it, that's a lot of work and probably annoying, but because influence there can move the global economy, which again runs on oil. That's why you see proxies and alliances for these countries in the Middle East. But I told you earlier that it's not about America wanting Iran's oil, remember? Why is that? The United States is actually the world's largest oil producer. It doesn't need to invade anyone to get access to crude oil. Not that that would necessarily stop it. I mean, we're American. More is more.
The United States seized 1.9 million barrels of oil on December 10th.
We're going to keep it. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in. A lot of money is coming out of the ground. We're going to get reimbursed for all of that. We're going to get reimbursed for everything that we spend. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect.
But what's really important here is the Strait of Hormuz. Look at this map of Skyrim. The Greybeards live here. It's called the Throat of the World. Our throat of the world is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow strait is where about a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas, or LNG, has to go through. It is the most important energy choke point that's ever existed, and there's no real alternative if ships can't go through it. Though I did see this post, so maybe X users can figure it out. And Iran effectively controls the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran, say, attacks ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz and insurers refuse to cover the expensive tankers going through, the supply of oil drops massively, driving prices of everything higher and up the global economy. And what better way to prevent Iran from thinking about doing that when they already weren't than launching surprise airstrikes? By the way, I'm going to talk about Japan specifically later, but keep in mind that many countries, especially in Asia, are almost entirely dependent on oil coming through the Strait of Hormuz. It is the world's oil bottleneck. Now, if you're like me, you want to know what the f*** America's even doing in Iran. Israel, for instance, wants the Iranian regime gone. They've been pretty clear. Crush Iran's security apparatus and facilitate regime change. Okay, but what about the US? Well, luckily the Trump administration has given clear answers with no equivocal or contradictory statements whatsoever. At the time of recording, and admittedly that may be well before this gets released, we can't say for sure because the Trump administration's stated goals have shifted repeatedly. Before Operation Epic Fury, which is what they called the February strikes, Trump urged Iranian citizens to rise up and protest, intimating he wanted regime change, but when those protests were met with mass arrests and killings, there was no immediate follow-through from the US. It was like hyping your friend up to fight the bouncer at a bar, then walking away and being like, this guy, never met him, I don't know. And despite listing regime change as an objective, Trump has also mentioned the possibility of making a deal with the Iranian regime. I mean, you know he can't resist the art of the deal. The US has also said the objective was to ensure Iran can't build nuclear weapons, though those capacities were supposed to have been obliterated in previous strikes. Other stated goals included protecting US allies and troops from aggression, damaging Iran's missile manufacturing and navy. Well, Israel was going to attack anyway, so America was just dragged into it, but reports claimed the US and Israel spent months planning a joint campaign before the February strikes. It could simply be that Iran was weak and primed for an attack. Maybe they thought it'd be an easy victory. With that in mind, let me give you 3 possible readings for this war. In my opinion, Trump has made many corrupt and inarguably stupid decisions, but I don't think it's pointless to attempt to ascertain the logic behind them. First, maybe the US genuinely believed that Iran's nuclear program posed an existential threat requiring preemptive action. Second, this is really Israel's war, and Trump's fervent support for Israel begot America's willingness to let Israeli goals dictate US military action. The third, that America and Israel believed Iran would fall quickly, that the regime would collapse, and that the Iranian people, who, remember, were protesting their government in January, would rise up. Perhaps they thought the mission would be over almost immediately like Venezuela. I honestly don't know. My personal perspective is that this is one of the stupidest things Trump has done in office, and I see this less as a carefully defined mission and more like a mix of not obviously compatible goals that keep changing. If you Google Operation Epic Fury, there's one of the funniest .gov pages I've ever seen telling you that Americans agree it's an overwhelming success, so that's a thing. But the truth is, Americans did not want another war in the Middle East, and Trump ran on an anti-war campaign. By the way, here's a statistic for you. No air campaign alone has successfully produced stable regime change. Not once in American history, and arguably never in modern warfare. And taking out the Ayatollah didn't do it either. So did Trump want to send ground troops and spend years in another Middle Eastern war? Probably not. This decision was profoundly unpopular even among many of Trump's own voters. Polling already showed Trump's popularity falling, and I think he's going to get creamed in the midterms. I hope, anyway. Okay, let's role play. No, not the fun kind. Put yourself in the position of Iran. Overnight, your supreme leader is dead. A big chunk of your command structure is gone, and airstrikes are ongoing. You can't match the US in a conventional war. What do? Well, maybe launch some missiles and drones at Israel and US military bases across the region, sure. But your most consequential move would be to close the Strait of Hormuz to your enemies, and by March 2nd, Iran effectively closed it. Obviously, right? Ships have been set ablaze, shipping companies have suspended Middle East routes, nobody wants to insure these ships. If you struggled to defeat the US military but controlled the passage of the world's oil, which affects everything, you could make the cost of continuing the war in your country so high that the US and its allies have to stop. That's the strategy. Every day the strait stays closed, the pressure on America grows. Gas prices are rising, voters can't afford their bills, markets are down, allies are pissed. Asian countries like Japan and South Korea suddenly can't get fuel and now have a reason to pressure the US. You can read more about the details, but that's the gist. Now, it doesn't take a strategic genius to anticipate this consequence, but it does seem like the US didn't seriously prepare for that possibility. So Trump has been scrambling with different approaches to reopen the strait, and some are pretty funny, like he urged allies and countries like China which is hilarious, to send ships to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. He's lifted oil sanctions. He issued a 48-hour ultimatum to reopen the strait and threatened to obliterate Iran's power plants if it wasn't reopened. He's complained a lot. So I think the question then becomes, what if Trump just declares victory and leaves without addressing the Strait of Hormuz? Trump can't really end the war on his terms unless he reopens the Strait of Hormuz, but reopening the strait is not straightforward. As of now, Iran is still fighting, the strait is still closed, and oil is still expensive. If Trump tried to do it by force, that would be a dramatic and unpopular escalation. We're talking ground troops, clearing mines, escorting ships, suppressing missiles and drones, probably for months. The possibility of this turning into World War III could grow. Things could remain expensive for too long, central banks could be forced to stay tight, and the risk of a global recession could rise. I mean, Trump ran on anti-war, right? But he would own this endless, ugly Middle Eastern conflict, and that would be his legacy, which I don't think he wants. Otherwise, he'd have to successfully negotiate with an even more hawkish regime than before, which he called terrorist, whose new supreme leader he called a lightweight, and who Israel has vowed to continue targeting. Now, if Trump withdraws without resolving Hormuz, it would be like your friend trashing your room, then leaving before your parents got home knowing your mom is going to kill you. And I will never forgive you, Stephen. Trump would leave the world with a massive problem he created and chose not to solve. The perception of America as a stabilizing force and military juggernaut would be damaged, just leaving signals that even after killing the supreme leader and blowing up a huge part of Iran's military, the US still could not guarantee safe passage through the world's most important energy choke point, despite its own self-interest in doing so. Risk premiums on energy and shipping insurance could go up, and it continues to piss off US allies even more. I mean, Trump would be saying, hey, so it's cool if we start a war for no clear reason that fucks your economy and energy security and leave without resolving anything, right? I mean, other countries are already questioning their dependence on US security guarantees. Not to mention that the economy basically everywhere, including the US, would remain less than ideal. At the time of recording, I have no idea how this will play out. On one hand, I feel like he really can't afford to just declare victory and leave. But on the other hand, I feel like that's maybe what he's going to do. Now, before we wrap this up, I need to tell you some obscure facts about Japan. Hey, that's how all my dates end. There's a joke. Japan has been living in the year 2000 since the 1980s. After its post-war boom, Japan became the second largest economy in the world, but then an asset bubble burst and growth basically stalled. In oversimplified terms, things in Japan were going really well, but then everything kind of froze. Now, to encourage people and businesses to spend money, the Bank of Japan pushed interest rates basically to zero, meaning you could borrow money essentially for free. So if I said, I will give you $1,000, and you don't have to pay any interest, just give me the $1,000 back in 10 years, what would you do? Other than salivate and wet yourself. I mean, even if all you did was take that money and put it in a high-yield savings account, you'd still be making money, right? This is called the yen carry trade. Investors basically borrowed in yen for free, converted it into dollars or other currencies, and invested it in higher-yielding assets for free money. And for years, this acted as a kind of hidden subsidy, I guess, for global financial markets, but it only works if borrowing costs in Japan stay low. For example, in 2024, the Bank of Japan raised interest rates for the first time in a long time, and that had enormous implications, because if borrowing yen suddenly becomes more expensive, the logic of this carry trade breaks down. You know, if I lent you $1,000, but instead say you have to pay me $100 every year, in addition to the $1,000 you owe me 10 years from now, 4 or 5% high yield savings account might not even cover the difference anymore, right? So investors started selling the assets they bought, like stocks and bonds, and used that money to pay back their loans. Okay, so why am I bringing this up now? Remember how most of Asia's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz? Think about Japan for a second. I mean, it's an island, right? They import their oil and LNG basically through the Strait of Hormuz and are dependent on imports. They got something like 250 days-ish worth of oil reserves, fewer for LNG, then they're screwed. Japan is one of the countries most exposed to Hormuz. And the longer oil stays expensive, the more pressure the Bank of Japan will face to raise interest rates to control inflation. And that's the dangerous feedback loop. Oil prices drive inflation. Inflation drives Japan to raise interest rates more aggressively. Higher interest rates drive the unwinding of the carry trade, and that means more selling of global assets. Even a modest interest rate hike in Japan can trigger selling pressure across global markets. Now, this is by no means guaranteed to spiral into a crisis, but I think it's an interesting side effect of the Iran war worth bringing up. So, yeah, that's where we are now. Despite the enemy, a surprise military strike on a sovereign nation while diplomatic negotiations are ongoing without formal authorization from Congress or UN Security Council approval is a pretty big breach of the rules-based international order that America used to champion. Everyone's in a more precarious position with the Strait of Hormuz closed, and I really don't know what a conclusion looks like. Even if they're somehow able to strike a deal, I think it will be difficult to unwind the reputational damage to America from this war. We'll see. Well, sorry that was kind of long and dry, but if you want a more lighthearted reflection on modern-day America, as well as China and Japan, check out this video next. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.